The animal shift, no, you can't come in that day because we don't let any females, even our own workers, on the shop floor that day when the animal shift's on. And this was just normal. One person can bring down a whole department if they're constantly negative. Just because you're good at your job doesn't mean you know all the answers.
What's the main challenge that people come to you with?
Engagement, retention, recruitment. Just wanting to do the best for their companies and their teams, but just not knowing how to.
You always remember the bad manager.
There was a guy called Jerry, and he was an appalling manager. But one interesting thing, if you can help them move forward, then maybe they can be different.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Jacqui. I run the Pathway Communication Company. And I'm a control engineer by trade.
Okay, and what's the Pathway Communication Company?
So when I was an engineer working in sales, marketing, that sort of area, I realised how hard some engineers find communication, and I realised how hard some engineering companies find communication. And it's really been what I've done the whole of my engineering career. So I started working with people on training and helping them move forward with their communications, and it really transformed their companies, transformed their sales, transformed their marketing, transformed mainly the internal communications, really engaging with their internal people.
Yeah.
And I thought, actually, I could do this. This is something that's needed in the industry. And so, that's what I do. I talk to people about their communications.
So what does a normal day look like for you?
A normal day could be on site somewhere, working in a company with maybe the senior management team, helping them to really think about how they explain what their goals are to their people, or maybe doing a training course on leadership to help people understand that communication is part of being a manager. You can't just go, or you do this. You have to actually talk to people, ask them what they think, bring them into the conversation. Or I might be at home doing some coaching online. I'm an executive coach as well, which is all part of, I think, of the same picture. And so I might be doing some executive coaching online, or I might be writing some articles for my website. So typical days aren't very typical.
Okay, yeah. So let's go back before Pathway.
Yes.
Where did you grow up? What did you want to be when you were older?
I grew up half in Portsmouth, half in Cambridge.
Okay.
So my parents moved to Cambridge when I was 11. My dad was in the printing industry, and the Portsmouth Evening News, Cambridge Evening News. So I always used to, and he was on the production side, so I used to go into, and he used to show me all the printing presses, and I was always like, I learned to read backwards as quickly as I can read forwards, because he was a compositor when he started. And I just was always fascinated by how things worked. So, how does a printing press work? How do you get the print onto paper, the ink onto the paper? And then I can remember seeing on television a video of a baked bean factory and being like, how did that happen? How did those beans get into that can? And just being mesmerised by it. So I think I just always wanted to know how things worked. I don't think I ever wanted to be an engineer because I don't know if I really knew what that was. My dad wasn't an engineer, he was in production.
Yep.
It wasn't, I just wanted to know how things worked, I think, really.
Did you think around that time that you wanted to go into a certain career, or?
No, I did my exams and they were just all over the place. They ranged from maths and physics to engineering, drawing and geography and stuff. So it was all over the place, and French and Latin and things.
Okay.
So it was like, I'll just do all the things I think I could do.
Yeah.
See what comes out at the end of it.
Do you have a favourite memory from your childhood?
I guess one of my favourite memories is going to Russia. It was a school trip when I was 15. I had my 15th birthday on a train between Moscow and Leningrad. And it was before the wall came down, and it was no schools had ever been before, and all our teachers and all their husbands and wives came with us, and it was an absolute ball for a week. Just loved it. So that was one of my favourite memories.
Amazing.
For sure.
It's a good experience.
Yeah.
I normally ask next what jobs you had when you were younger, but I read that you were the youngest apprentice at Phillips. Is that right?
The first female
First
apprentice,
female apprentice at
Phillips.
Okay.
Yeah, so when I was 16, I did all my exams, and then I was going to do A-levels.
Yep.
And I went and did a day of A-levels and decided I didn't like them.
Right.
So I went home. This was the sort of child I was. I went home, rung the college and said, could I come and do something there instead? Because I don't think I liked school, and I went back for a day. And they said, sure, with what you've got, you can come and do this course. I said, I love engineering drawing. Can I come and do something to do with that? And they said, yeah, there's this course you can come and do. So my mum came home from work, and I said, oh, how was school? And I was like, I left. So I went to college and ended up doing 2 years of electronic engineering. I didn't know that was the course. I was exempt from the engineering drawing bit because I'd got the exam, so I never did any more of that. But I really enjoyed the course. I was the only girl in the whole department, and I just had a whale of a time for 2 years. Loved it, and then applied for an apprenticeship and got the apprenticeship at Phillips. So
okay, what was that like then when you joined Phillips?
It was great. They were a really good company to work for. They at that time they were most of Cambridge. There was about 10 different Phillips companies in Cambridge. So they ran company buses from all over and everything. So it was a really great environment. But I think the main thing I got was it was a factory. So I worked in every single department in the whole factory. So I learned a bit about everything.
Yeah.
But it was there, I guess, I probably started realising what good and bad managers were, because I had some really good ones, really encouraging, Jacqui, just go for it, do whatever you want to do. And I had some really bad ones who were just awful to apprentices.
Yeah, isn't it amazing how that sticks with you forever? You always remember the bad manager.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But one interesting thing from then was, I was thinking about this when you emailed me. There was a guy called Jerry, and he was an appalling manager. He just used to shout at me the whole time, literally all the time. He never spoke to me, only shouted. And then I found out that he'd been in the war, in the Arctic convoys and stuff.
Right.
And I started asking him. And then he started talking to me and telling me all about it. And what I realised was sometimes people just reflect what their background is. And if you can help them move forward, then maybe they can be different. And I feel like that was the first time I ever experienced that, when I actually went to him and went, somebody's told me you're in the war. What did you do? And he was like, oh.
yeah. People open up when you take interest in them. Yeah,
and ask them questions.
Yeah,
so that was really interesting. I hadn't connected that until I was talking to you, and I was like, yeah, actually, maybe he was the first person I'd really, really asked the questions of.
Yeah. Was there any moments during that period that have stuck with you throughout your career, other than Jerry? Things that have gone wrong, or things that worked in your favour, that probably going to be around communication, because that's how your career went. Any other instances that you can think of?
I did from Phillips Unicam, Phillips Scientific, I went into Phillips Industrial Automation, and they made redundant the whole department, apart from one support engineer, and then brought me in to do everybody's jobs. So that was quite a baptism of fire. Go and work in sales, which you've never worked in before, and know you don't have any help. So that was a hard job, but I did it for a couple of years and was successful at it, and then went out on the road as a sales engineer. And I think that was probably one of the hardest jobs I'd done, because I was in the south of England. I was living back in Portsmouth, so I was covering the whole of the south of England, and nobody there had ever seen a female sales engineer before, literally. There was one other woman on the road working for RS. So maybe a few of them had seen her, but literally there was just me and her. And it was just hard work. I got the appointments, no problem, because everyone was like a female. But the abuse and the rubbish I got was just horrendous. There's one big factory in Southampton, which I won't name. And I used to ring them and say to them, can I come in and see you? Because they used our products. And the guy was like, hang on, let me check which shift is on. Oh, it's the animal shift. No, you can't come in that day because we don't let any females, even our own workers, on the shop floor that day when the animal shift's on. And this was just normal. in the industry, because
What was the animal shift?
they were just so awful to women that they just didn't let any women on the shop floor when they were on. And it was a whole shift. So they had 3 shifts and one of them, so I could only go in when one of the other 2 shifts were on, because those were not rude to women on the shop floor. So those sort of things were very different to like they are now. I mean, you wouldn't get that now.
Well, that was going to be my follow-on.
Yeah.
I certainly don't see that now, but I'm assuming things have drastically changed. Yes, good.
Yeah, and not everybody was like it, of course, then. I always and still did, right up to the last years in Festo, occasionally I go into companies and I get people going, so, are you really an engineer? And I'd be like, yes. And they'd be like, okay, so if you are, tell me why I would use 4 to 20 milliamps over 1 to 5 volts on my system. And I'd be like, really? Do you not know then?
God.
And so there is still a little bit of that, but it's far, far less than it was when I started, when literally everybody would have stupid questions then.
So was the hardest part, your first role in sales, was the hardest part then the perception of you from customers, or was it something else? Was it getting a deal over the line, or whatever it might be, something to do with the job, or was that the hardest part?
I think it was that, and the managers I had were also quite bad.
Yep.
I had a manager then who lived in Halifax and was the Southern Regional Manager, which I never did work out. And he just used to tell me off for anything all of the time. He ended up giving me a warning, a verbal warning in fleet services, that I wasn't doing enough calls, and I was going to this place called Sutton that he'd never heard of, and that therefore I was obviously making up calls. I'm like, well, if you lived around here, you'd know that was Southampton, because everybody knows Sutton is Southampton, because that's what you'd write on a sheet. Yeah. And so I think the customers who were awkward, plus the managers who were not really sure what I was doing there.
Yeah, my first role, I was basically given a spreadsheet and said, from the manager at that time, this is who I used to sell to at a completely different company.
Really?
Selling a different brand altogether. And I was like, oh, well, where the hell do I start? I started as an apps engineer where everyone wanted to see me.
Yeah.
All of a sudden I'm a salesperson, no one wants to see me.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's an example of a bad manager.
Yes, exactly. And the good thing was they did put me on some training. The first training they put me on was run by a guy who'd sold a combine harvester once. So that wasn't the best training I'd ever been on. But then they put me on a proper sales training course, and that was really good. And I did actually learn how to do sales then properly.
Wow. Okay. So you worked for Eurotherm, is that right?
Yeah, so I went from there, that was Sedgwick, to Eurotherm, yeah.
Managing salespeople?
So I went in as an internal sales engineer,
Yep.
but then ran the internal sales office
Okay.
for them. So managing all the internal salespeople, project engineers on secondment to me, the IT desk.
Was it at that point you thought, I know, I've learnt from bad managers or bad practices? Was it at that point you thought, I've got a gift for this, I understand people? Yeah,
I think so. I think that's when I started to realise that maybe I was better at it than some other people.
Yep.
And that I could look at other people and go, I'm not like that.
Yeah.
I'm better than they are,
yeah.
For sure. But I think for me, it's a little bit of a natural thing anyway. I think I'm naturally empathetic with people and naturally ask people how they are and ask the questions. And I also... One of the things I found in engineering is a lot of men don't want to ask stupid questions because they feel that their pride's at stake and there's other men in the room, whereas I don't care. So I would always ask the stupid questions, and I'd always want my team to be involved in the answers. I'd want to ask them what they thought. Well, what do you think about this issue we've got? How do you think we could solve it? Because I don't think I'm the best at it. So I think that's always been a natural advantage for me as well. And that's what I try and teach other people, that, just because you're good at your job doesn't mean you know all the answers.
Yeah. So how did you feel about taking on the responsibility of a team? That first week going changing from being part of the team to being the manager? Was it a natural?
It was hard because I was friends with these people and that I was managing my friends.
Yeah.
That was hard. I made a couple of bad recruitment decisions where I can remember recruiting. I was told I had to bring the finance guy in to help me do the recruitment, and I didn't like him, so I didn't. And I made a bad hire. So I got into quite a lot of trouble for that. So I learned quite a lot of lessons there. And then I had project engineers coming to work for me, reading quotes, because we were quoting to British Steel and Pilkington's Glass, Lindsay Oil Refinery, people like that, big contracts. And I used to have a project engineer in with me, and there was a guy, Graham his name was, and he was in his 50s and I was in my late 20s. And he came in because he didn't want to go out on the road anymore. He didn't want to be an application or a project engineer going out and doing projects. So they said to him, well, go and work for Jacqui then. And he was like, do I have to? And literally argued for about a month, and eventually was told that it was that or he had to leave. So that was a really hard one. I really struggled with him. But I got there. We came to an arrangement. We worked out how to work together. He never did work as fast as I needed him to. Because he was far more thorough than I needed him to be when all we were doing was putting a quote together. We're not engineering the thing now, we're just doing a quote. But I have to think about all the different aspects, Jacqui. So I used to have to build more time in for him to do things than I would have done for anyone else. But we managed to get along. So, yeah.
So I'm going to go into your successes in business, but I noticed on your LinkedIn that you do some charity work. So I wanted to ask you about, talk me through what you do.
I run a charity. My sister's a missionary in Thailand.
Okay.
So I run the UK arm of her charity.
Okay.
She raises money and we take the money in, we manage it here and we send it over to Thailand. I used to run another charity that was some pastoral work in schools as well. And I just love doing that sort of stuff because I think it's good to not think about your business or your work all the time and do something different.
Well, the natural question is, how do you find the time? But I'm sure you would say, well, you make the time because you're passionate about
and I think one of the advantages of being self-employed and running my own business is I can do it when I want to do it.
Pick and choose.
So if I'm like, my head is in this article I'm writing and I can't get it out, then I'll just go and do half an hour on the charity stuff and just clear my head and I'll come back a lot fresher anyway. So for me, it's a bonus, especially when you're working on your own a lot and you're sitting at your desk on your own a lot. You need something to take your mind off it, I think.
Yes. Yeah. I was listening to a podcast this morning actually and they were talking about procrastinating, and actually procrastinating is not such a bad thing as long as it's not, taking over your life. And you do need to jump out of... Maybe I need a sort of something else instead of just flicking through TikTok or looking at Instagram.
I'll do all that as well. But,
that makes me feel better. So, Festo, big chunk of your career.
Yeah.
Could you talk me through? It sounds ridiculous, of course. It's 22 years, but you were a marketing manager and then you ended up spearheading strategy, is that right? So
I was product marketing manager.
Yes.
No, I won't say marketing manager because if Simon ever listens to this, he'll go mad. So I was product marketing manager. I came in as product manager because Festo's at its core, at that time it was a pneumatic company. Yep. I had never even heard of the word pneumatics when I interviewed with them because I'm a control engineer. I know all about control stuff. Yep. But they brought me in because I knew about control and most of their sales engineers didn't. So they wanted me to train their sales engineers what it was. So I came in and I took on their new products. I launched one of their big new product ranges. But for me, it wasn't just about the work I did in GB. It was also about the work I did in Germany and throughout Europe and worldwide, really, because I was part of a team who came together, all the product managers worldwide, and we helped launch those products. I facilitated groups. We wrote training about what the benefits of these products were to our customers and all of those things. So those are the bits I loved, you know, travelling a lot, and really just being part of a bigger picture than the smaller company in GB, because it's, you know, 100 people in GB, it's not massive. But when you look at Festo as a whole, it is a massive company.
It is a huge company, yeah, of course it is.
And the good thing about it was I had the opportunity to be part of the bigger company. I wasn't constrained just to the UK, which I loved.
So what was the strategy part? Not just marketing, was it a wider thing? So
I did the product management, product marketing manager, and then the company had a company strategy which had been introduced by the then MD Gary Wiles, and it was about making sure that you don't keep the goals and the where you want to go as a company within the senior management team, that you share them with the whole company. Because if you share them with the company will come with you. They'll help you. They'll keep you accountable. So he was running that, and he was struggling with doing that and being the MD. So he asked me to come on board with him and work with him on that. And we did that. We worked together. We developed it. We went on quite a lot of training courses to bring ideas in from other places. And we really built it up into something that was really successful. And that was then rolled out throughout Europe and it's gone further than Europe now in Festo.
Wow.
As an idea. So, yeah, it was really successful. And the concept of that is probably the basis of what I do now. Where if you have an idea as a manager, or have something you want to achieve, you need to ask for ideas from your people, because otherwise they know it better than you often. You know, they know what's going on the ground. They know what might succeed and what might not. And if you try and do it all yourself, you're only ever going to have your view.
Yeah.
And especially in engineering, I think there's so many 50-year-old white males that to bring the younger generation in, we need to involve them and ask their opinion. We need to bring different cultures, different ages, women as well as men, and ask their opinions, because they're the ones that are sitting there going, I would do this differently.
Yeah. I tell a little anecdote that sort of spins off that. The typical middle-aged white guy in a suit that I was introduced to that worked for one of the big global brands, and by this point, a lot of their competitors were already on board with the business. And I told him about it, little elevator pitch, and he said, "No, it wouldn't work for us." I said, well, why? He said, well, I already know every engineer in the UK. And I had to bite my tongue.
Really?
Yeah.
But yeah. Every single one?
Every single one.
Or every single one that was his age and his colour?
Possibly, maybe. Certainly no one under 50, I'd have thought. So I went home that night and I emailed every college and university in the UK that offers engineering courses, and I said, I'm building this thing, it's free, I'll come and talk to your students. And we've started taking the brands in to speak to the students. Brilliant. And the latter part of that, connecting to your response, now we're working with apprenticeship providers and going to the apprentices in person to say, what do you want us to build that keeps you engaged in this?
Yeah.
Because for us as a business, they're going to be the ones that will know the Engineers Insight brand. They're going to be the ones using it on shop floors. Yeah. It's not going to be that guy that knows every engineer in the UK, because he'll be retired, but he's not thinking about anyone around him or...
And that's what I see. I see a lot of engineering businesses that have been started by the person on the shop floor who's worked their way up, and they're now in their 50s and they know what they want to do with the business. It's all in their head, and they've got the plan in their head. They've never told anyone else, but you can't run a business like that. Businesses is changing. Businesses are changing, and you have to be agile. You have to change, and by getting everybody involved, that's how you're going to change, isn't it? Exactly like you're doing with Engineers Insights.
Yep. So when did you build Pathway? What was the crossover between Festo?
So I'd trained as a coach internally with Festo as well, which I loved. Absolutely loved doing as a team coach, and we had a big internal coaching network of people, and I loved doing that. And I just got to the point where I thought, actually, I want to do something different now. I don't want to... I'd moved out of product recruitment, product marketing management, worked in marketing for a bit, and I'd done all those things. And I'd really done everything I could do without moving to Germany, and I didn't want to do that.
Yep.
So I thought, actually, what do I want to do? So I decided to go part-time and train as an executive coach with the International Coaching Federation, which I now am. And then as I was talking to people about coaching, they were also asking me about strategy and about communication and about training of people of coaching. How do you maybe introduce a coaching culture into a company, or how do you train a leader or whatever? And I was like, actually, this is bigger than just coaching. Yep. This is about communication. So I ran the business for about 5 years side by side. And then last year I left Festo and went full time. It would probably been a few years earlier, but for lockdown.
Yeah, of course.
But, you know, it was the right time. It meant I didn't have a hard stop. It didn't have a right, no money, now go earn your own money. It was more of a gentle move into full time.
How did you find it through lockdown, being a business coach? You know, I imagine that it's much easier in a room full of people where you can. Was it difficult over Teams?
I always did most of my coaching online.
Okay.
I always have done.
Right.
I hardly ever coach anybody face to face. Actually, can't remember the last time I did. So that wasn't an issue for me. Yeah. There was no real big thing. What happened though was a lot of people, none of the training happened. I still work with Gary Wiles, and we did develop some online training. So we did deliver some training online, but nowhere near as much as we would have done. And I was still doing coaching, but again, nowhere near as much. So the business slowed right down, but I was still working for Festo. Right. So that was good.
Yeah.
So that gave me that security that I needed through lockdown, I think. If I'd just been running the business, it would have been a lot harder.
Yeah, it'd be difficult. So what challenges are you facing now as a business owner?
I think the biggest challenge is just getting people to commit to something, because lots of people are very enthusiastic, but everyone's just so busy, aren't they? Mm-hmm. And I feel like everybody is working at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Yep. And although they want to do things, they just never quite get there. Mm-hmm. And how do you... It's that line between nagging and being annoying. I'm sure you have the same problem.
Yes. It's funny because a lot of guests say a similar thing, whether it's, you know, we had the sales director at Jacqui who's selling robots, and he talked about there's loads of quotes out there, there's loads of projects, but actually getting it over the line and putting a signature on the dotted line is the difficult bit. Or we had Angela Lawler a couple of episodes before you, who goes into schools, takes manufacturers into schools, or goes in herself on behalf of them to talk about what is manufacturing and why is it important. And the hardest thing that she faces is the commitment from either side, even schools. Yeah. You know, she was talking to us about a couple of schools close to her that she's rang them 5 times and emailed 5 times, and you know, this is a fantastic service for them, but people just don't respond.
No. And I do think a lot of it, I've spoke to a few people about it, and I think it is just everyone seems to be working at 1,000,000% of them now, and that's the way the world is.
Yeah.
And they just don't, it's the urgent versus the important, isn't it? They know this is important, but the urgent just prods them constantly, and they never get time to get to the important.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's your challenge, but I'm sure you get a lot of challenges from clients. What's the main challenge that people come to you with?
Engagement of their staff, retention of their staff, recruitment, especially in the engineering, manufacturing sectors, and I guess just wanting to do the best for their companies and their teams, but just not knowing how to. I think I've just been coaching somebody who's an ops director, and he's the same. He's got an amazing team, but he just needs some help to get over the line, to get them the best out of them. And as an engineer who's worked his way through, he's really struggling with knowing how to talk to them and knowing how to even ask them what they think, because it's seen as a sign of weakness. So I think just that communication really is what what people are struggling with, and more people coming to me just because they see a talk about communication and they're like, can I talk to you about this, but don't tell anyone. Which is another problem I have. I have hardly any references from anyone because nobody wants anyone to know I talk to them. How does that work?
Yeah,
just difficult. Let me give your name. No.
So what's the answer then for this ops director? They want to connect to their team. What do you tell them? How do they change, or what do they do?
So what I've talked to him about is sharing a bit about his thoughts, and not because he's got lots of issues. And he doesn't want to be seen as weak admitting to them. So for me, it's about talking to people and saying, what's the worst that will happen? If you tell people that the reason you're acting like this is because this is happening, what's the worst that will happen? Well, they might criticise me. Okay, so what's the other worst thing that will happen? Well, they might be able to help. Well, exactly. So what I've been doing is working on him over a number of months, to help him just try and get the confidence that actually it's not about his image if he shares this stuff with people. And as he has started to share things and say, right, pull everyone together and go, right, these are our issues. Let's brainstorm what the solutions could be. Actually, his team have got some amazing solutions he'd never have thought of himself.
Yep. And people buy in as well,
Yeah, yeah. And it makes people feel part of it. It makes them stay with the company. Yeah. Because they feel like they understand the problems. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what he couldn't get. He wanted to present it as a perfect department. And that's unrealistic. No, everyone knows nowhere's perfect. No company's perfect to work for. But if you understand the issues and you're part of the solution, then that's why you stay, isn't it? Mm-hmm. I think.
Okay. That's fantastic to get your insight, really. So here's a scenario. You're stood in front of a classroom of students. Does it particularly matter what age? They're going to come into industry at some point. What advice would you give them?
I would say it doesn't matter what your skill set is. You can be in industry. Because I talk to a lot. I'm a STEM ambassador, so I've done quite a lot of work. And I talk to people who are really fashion conscious or very bubbly, and they're like, well, engineering's really boring. Nobody speaks to each other. They all just sit at desks with headphones on, or they're out there with a hard hat and whatever. And I'm like, but it's not like that. Within that engineering spectrum, there's lots and lots of different jobs. You can work in marketing, you can work in sales, you can work in graphic design. You can do any of those things as an engineer. And for me, that's what really makes their eyes open. And especially if I talk a little bit about my career to them and all the different things I've done, and all the travel I've done and all the different factories I've been into, and I used to challenge them to say to me, ask me how something works. And they'd be like, what, anything? I'd be like, well, anything you use, how is it made? And there's not very many things I haven't seen being made, or can't imagine how they are made from all the things I've seen. Yep. And I think that, for me, it's about getting them curious about what it is.
That's a word I always drop in. And I've repeated it in a lot of the episodes.
I'll do it for you this time.
Thank you. What skills do you think is vital for them? That same cohort of students, what skills are going to help them most?
I think having the sort of mind that gets what engineering is. So if they are not curious about anything, and at Festo we did STEM days, they still do them, where we bring people in and do a pneumatic circuit, get them to build a pneumatic circuit. And some of them are not people who've ever thought about engineering before, but they're in there. What does this do? What does that do? If they're just standing back and going, I don't really care, then those are the people that shouldn't be going into engineering. So it's about wanting to find out. And if you want to find out, and I'll even say that at the end, if you were really interested about how that rig worked and what pneumatics are and stuff, then you could be an engineer, because that's all it takes.
Yes.
Just need to want to know.
Yeah. So when you've built teams, what principles do you look for? If you're hiring or even you've took over a team, what makes that team successful? There's a word, culture, that gets bandied about, and obviously now I'm an entrepreneur. I listen to all of this crap everywhere on the internet, and I don't know what that means, really.
I think it means whatever you want it to mean in your company. So I think you decide what your team culture is, and you go for it. So for me, when I've inherited a team like I did at Eurotherm, it was about, what do I want the feel to be? What do I want these people to feel when they come to work? Okay. I want them to feel that I'm invested in them. I want them to trust me, and I want to trust them. So I want to build a trust level between us, that they could go out there and make a massive mistake, and I would have their back, because I know they haven't done it on purpose.
Yeah.
And I want them to. I'm not going to share everything with them, but I want to share with them the issues and the successes. So if we lose a big customer, I don't want to hide that from them, that, something's gone wrong. I'll talk to them about that we've just lost a big order, but I'll also talk to them about, right, what else are we quoting? What else could we fill the gap with?
Yeah.
So for me, the culture is about how you want it to feel. And for me, it's about trust. It's about wanting to work together, and it's about wanting to be part of the company and wanting to be there, because the worst people are the ones who just don't want to be there.
Well, that leads on.
Here, then.
Yeah, well, that leads on to my next question. What's the hardest thing about managing people?
I think it's those ones, the ones that just don't want to be there. And you can work with them. And I've worked with some teams where people just don't want to be there. But I think at the end of, eventually, some people just need to leave because they're disruptive. And one person can bring down a whole department if they're constantly negative, and constantly being a problem to a team. You've got to try with them. But sometimes I've had to be like, it's time we found another job. And of course, I'd never say that, but sometimes you just have to think this isn't working now.
And have you had to sack people or ask them to leave?
I haven't had to sack people, but I have managed to. I had a girl. The recruitment hire that went wrong that I mentioned earlier. I ended up just sitting down with her and going, "What do you really want to do?" And she said, "I really want to be a teacher." So I basically went and found out everything about teaching and managed to persuade her to sign off for a course, and she left and went to be a teacher. So sometimes you don't. Sometimes you don't have to get rid of somebody. Sometimes you can just, I guess, encourage what their passion is. And her passion wasn't to be in this company.
Yeah, that actually shows your communication skill. And I'm sure there'd be a lot of managers out there that would have just said, "You don't fit this team or this company, it's time for you to leave." So it's probably a good point, the way that you spoke to that person worked in your favour. Yeah. Okay, I've got some closers.
Okay, ready.
What's your favourite business book?
Who Moved My Cheese? I forgot who it's by, but it's basically a book about mice and change management, about mice in a maze.
Yep.
And the cheese is always in the same place. They just go there, they eat, and they come away again. And one day the cheese has moved, and one mouse just sits there and waits for the cheese to come back. And the other mouse, after he's sat there for a couple of days, thinks, actually, I might die here. I need to go and find some more cheese, and sets off. And it's just such a good example of how different people react to the same situation, and how, as managers, we can ask the questions and, what would happen if you never moved from this place and the cheese never came back?
The reason I asked is because I want to read business books. I just can't.
You'd like this one, honestly.
Really?
Yeah, because I'm a real reader of the first chapter, and then I think I know what the rest of this book's going to say, and I then get a bit bored.
Yeah.
But this book's more like a story, and it's only about this thick. Right. I'd have bought it with me if I'd known, and you could have borrowed it.
Yeah.
But it's a lot. It's different to normal business books. And because I prefer podcasts and interviews and stuff like that.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I've always got my AirPods in. I'm always listening to podcasts.
Yeah.
Much easier to consume than,
Yeah.
I'll read a couple of pages then. I'm on TikTok or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you consider yourself successful?
Yeah, I think I have been successful. I think I've had a successful career, and I think my business is, getting there. Yeah.
And the success that you've had, how much would you attribute to hard work and how much to luck?
I think you make your own luck by hard work. Putting yourself out there and there's always the meeting that is like, wow, that was amazing, but I think you've got to put yourself out there to be lucky.
Yeah, totally agree. Now, this episode will be out by the time we film the next, so of course you don't know who the next guest would be, neither do I actually, but without knowing them, what question would you ask them? Your experience around communications or leadership, or what should I ask them to press them on that?
I would ask them the culture question. What is the culture in your company and what does that mean to you?
Okay.
Because I think that's really good to get people to think about that sometimes.
Yeah.
Think about what their culture is.
Yeah.
And it means that it's something different to everybody. So.
Yeah, and it's usually plastered on a wall somewhere that no one actually reads or.
Exactly. I mean, most companies have a vision, a mission, values, and whatever. And part of the culture is actually making sure people know what they are and that you live them. Because if you don't live them, what's the point? You may as well just throw them away.
Yep. Okay. Well, that's it. You can relax.
Thank you.
Where can people follow you?
I'm on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Okay.
Mostly on LinkedIn.
All right. That's fine. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for being a guest. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been great.
I think there's a lot in there that people will get value from, and there's a lot of people that will think, God, I've got a bad manager.
But bring me in. I'll help you with that.
Well, that's perfect. Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.